The whiskey bottle shattered against the wall beside Theresa Vaughn's head, and she knew this time would be different from all the others. Her brother Marcus stood in the doorway of their ramshackle cabin outside Fort Stanton, New Mexico, his eyes bloodshot and wild, his hands trembling not from fear, but from the desperate need for another drink. It was August 1878, and the summer heat had turned their small home into an oven, but the chill running down Theresa's spine had nothing to do with temperature. "I am done with you," Marcus snarled, his words slurring together. "You eat my food, you take up space, and you give me nothing but your pathetic crying." Theresa pressed herself against the rough wooden wall, her 20-year-old body thin from too many meals skipped so her brother could buy liquor instead of flour. She had been 16 when their parents died of fever, leaving Marcus as her guardian. For 4 years she had endured his rages, his accusations, his fists when the drink made him forget she was his sister and not just another obstacle between him and oblivion. "I work hard," she said quietly, though she knew better than to argue. "I mend clothes for Mrs. Henderson. I help at the general store when they need me." "And where is that money?" Marcus lurched forward, grabbing her arm with fingers that dug into her flesh like talons. "You keep it for yourself, you selfish little witch." "Well, no more. I have found a solution to my problem." Terror flooded through Theresa as Marcus dragged her toward the door. She had nowhere to go, no family except this man who had become a stranger wearing her brother's face. Their nearest neighbor was half a mile away, and in this harsh land people learned to mind their own business. The law in Fort Stanton was stretched thin, more concerned with cattle rustlers and outlaws than with what happened inside a family's home. The sun blazed down as Marcus hauled her into the yard where 2 horses stood waiting. He had planned this, she realized with dawning horror. This was not a drunken impulse, but something he had arranged while sober enough to scheme. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "To town. There is a man willing to pay good money for a woman, no questions asked. You are young enough, pretty enough, despite looking like a scarecrow. He will give me enough to keep myself in whiskey for months." The words hit Theresa like a physical blow. Her brother was going to sell her as if she were livestock. She had heard whispers of such things happening, women sold to brothels or to men looking for wives in this territory where women were scarce. But she had never imagined her own blood would trade her away for alcohol money. She tried to pull free, but Marcus backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling in the dust. Her lips split, blood trickling down her chin as he grabbed her again and threw her onto one of the horses. He tied her wrist to the saddle horn with rough rope that bit into her skin, then mounted his own horse and led them both toward Fort Stanton. The ride took less than an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. Theresa's mind raced, searching for escape routes, for someone who might help. But what could she do? She had no money, no possessions except the worn dress on her back. Even if she ran, where would she go in this unforgiving landscape? Fort Stanton was not a large town, but it bustled with activity. Founded as a military fort in the 1850s, it had grown into a settlement that served ranchers, miners, and travelers passing through New Mexico territory. The main street was lined with wooden buildings, a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a blacksmith shop. Theresa had been here dozens of times, but now it looked different, menacing as Marcus led her toward the saloon. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. Men turned to look as Marcus pulled Theresa through the door, and she saw calculation in their eyes, the way they might assess a horse or a piece of land. She wanted to scream, to beg for help, but the words stuck in her throat. Marcus approached a man sitting alone at a corner table. He was enormous, with a belly that strained against his vest, and a face that reminded Theresa of a bulldog. This was Samuel Pierce, the man who ran the saloon and, according to rumor, several other less savory businesses in the territory. "I have brought what we discussed," Marcus said, shoving Theresa forward. Pierce looked her up and down with cold eyes. "She is scrawnier than you claimed, and that bruise on her face will not help. She cleans up fine, and she is young, intact, worth what we agreed on. Theresa found her voice. Please, this is wrong. You cannot do this. Pierce ignored her, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a leather pouch. He counted out coins onto the table, the clink of metal obscenely loud in Theresa's ears. $30. Her brother was selling her for $30. Marcus grabbed the money with shaking hands, not even looking at Theresa as he turned toward the door. She lunged after him, but Pierce caught her arm in an iron grip. Marcus, please, do not do this. I am your sister. Her brother paused at the door, and for a moment Theresa thought she saw something flicker in his eyes, some remnant of the boy who had once protected her from bullies and carried her on his shoulders. But then it was gone. Drowned in whatever demon lived in those bottles he loved more than family. You are nothing to me, he said, and walked out into the sunlight. Theresa felt something break inside her chest, some last thread of hope or love or belief in human goodness. Pierce dragged her toward a back room, and she knew she had minutes, maybe seconds, before whatever came next. Her mind went blank with panic. Then a voice cut through the chaos. How much? Everyone in the saloon turned. A man stood near the bar, tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of a winter sky. He wore dusty traveling clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, and a gun hung low on his hip with the easy comfort of someone who knew how to use it. Theresa had never seen him before. Pierce's grip tightened on her arm. This is not your concern, stranger. I asked how much, the man repeated, his voice calm but carrying an edge like a knife blade. You just paid $30 for her. I will give you $50. The saloon went quiet. Pierce's eyes narrowed with suspicion and greed. What is a drifter cowboy wanting with a woman? You do not look like you have $50 to your name. The cowboy reached into his jacket and pulled out a roll of bills, placing them on the bar with deliberate care. I have what I need. $50. That is a tidy profit for doing nothing but sitting on your rear for 5 minutes. Theresa stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. Was this man really trying to buy her, or was this some trick? His face gave nothing away, but something in his stance suggested coiled tension, like a rattlesnake deciding whether to strike. Pierce licked his lips, clearly calculating. $50 was significant money, more than he would make off Theresa in weeks, even if he put her to work in the worst ways. But there was principle involved and pride. Why should I sell to you? Pierce asked. Maybe I want to keep her for myself. The cowboy's hand dropped casually to rest near his gun. Because I am asking nicely, and because the alternative is me taking her without paying at all. The threat hung in the air. Several of Pierce's men shifted, hands moving toward their own weapons, but the cowboy did not flinch. Theresa could barely breathe, caught between terror and a desperate hope she did not dare name. Finally, Pierce released her arm and held out his hand. $50. And then you get out of my saloon and do not come back. The cowboy nodded, taking the money to Pierce and accepting a scribbled receipt that meant nothing legally but satisfied whatever code governed these transactions. Then he turned to Theresa and held out his hand. Can you walk? She nodded mutely, her legs shaking as she moved toward him. He did not touch her, just gestured for her to precede him out of the saloon. She could feel every eye in the room on her back as they left. Outside, the sunlight was blinding. Theresa stood on the wooden sidewalk, disoriented and lost. The cowboy moved past her to where a beautiful chestnut horse was tied at the hitching post. He checked the saddle, then turned back to her. What is your name? He asked. Theresa. Theresa Vaughn. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. My name is Colton Vaughn. No relation, I assume, given the circumstances. He paused, studying her face with those winter sky eyes. Are you hurt, besides the lip? No, I mean, yes, but... She could not make her thoughts form coherent sentences. Nothing made sense. Why did you buy me? Colton untied his horse and began walking down the street away from the saloon. Come with me. We should get you cleaned up and fed. Then we can talk." Theresa followed because she had no other choice, her mind reeling. They walked to the hotel, a 2-story building with peeling paint but relatively clean windows. Colton spoke briefly with the clerk, then led Theresa upstairs to a room. It was simple but clean, with a bed, a washstand, and a chair. Colton set his saddlebags down and poured water from a pitcher into the basin. "Wash your face," he said. "There is bread and cheese in that bag if you are hungry. I will be back in an hour." "Wait," Theresa said as he turned toward the door. "I do not understand. What are you going to do with me?" Colton looked at her for a long moment. "Nothing. I'm going to give you a choice, which is something you have not had in a while, I would guess. When I come back, we will talk about what you want to do next. But for now, rest. You are safe." Then he was gone, the door closing softly behind him. Theresa stood frozen for several seconds, waiting for the trick, for the moment when this stranger would reveal his true intentions, but the room remained quiet except for her own ragged breathing. Finally, she moved to the washstand and looked at herself in the small mirror above it. A stranger stared back. A thin woman with tangled brown hair, a split lip already swelling, and bruises on her arms in the shape of Marcus's fingers. When had she become this person? She washed her face carefully, wincing as the water stung her lip. Then she found the bread and cheese Colton had mentioned and ate slowly, her shrunken stomach protesting at first before accepting the food gratefully. When she was done, she sat on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, and tried to think. Colton had said she was safe, that he would give her a choice. But what choice did a woman in her position really have? She had no money, no family, no prospects. Even if this stranger meant well, what could he do for her, and why would he? Men did not spend $50 out of kindness. An hour passed slowly. Theresa found herself studying every detail of the room, memorizing it the way she used to memorize the cabin before one of Marcus's rages, looking for anything that could be a weapon or an escape route. The window overlooked the main street. If she screamed, would anyone come? Or would they assume she was just another woman getting what she deserved? When the door finally opened, she jumped. But it was only Colton returning with a wrapped package. He set it on the bed. "New clothes," he said. "The store owner's wife helped me pick them out. They should fit well enough, and I brought this." He placed a small leather pouch next to the package. Theresa stared at it. "What is that?" $50. The same I paid for you, give or take." He pulled the chair away from the wall and sat down, leaving plenty of space between them. "Here is what I'm proposing. You can take that money and these clothes and go wherever you want. The stage leaves tomorrow morning for Santa Fe. From there, you can go anywhere the rails reach. Or you can stay here in Fort Stanton if you prefer, though I would not recommend it given your brother and Pierce." "I do not understand," Theresa said again. "Why would you give me money?" Colton leaned back in the chair, his expression thoughtful. "I came into that saloon looking for information about a cattle drive. Instead, I saw a man selling his sister like she was property. I have seen a lot of ugly things in this territory, but that—" He shook his head. "I could not walk away, and I could not let Pierce keep you for what he had planned. So you bought me instead. I stopped a transaction that never should have happened in the first place. Now I am trying to give you back what was taken, which is the right to decide your own future." Theresa looked at the money, then at Colton. He was perhaps 25 years old, with the lean, weathered look of someone who spent his life outdoors. His hands were calloused, his clothes were work-worn, and there was a quietness about him that suggested he did not speak unless he had something worth saying. Nothing about him suggested he was lying. "What if I do not want to go anywhere?" she asked quietly. "What if I have nowhere to go?" "Then we will figure something else out." "Why? Why do you care what happens to me?" Colton was quiet for a moment, his eyes distant. "My mother was sold when I was 12 years old. We were slaves in Missouri before the war. I watched a man pay money for her and take her away, and I never saw her again. When the war ended and I was freed, I tried to find her, but she was just gone, like she'd never existed. His voice remained steady, but Theresa heard the old pain beneath it. I swore that if I ever had the chance to stop something like that from happening to someone else, I would. Today, I had that chance. Understanding crashed over Theresa like a wave. This man knew what it felt like to be treated as property, to have your humanity reduced to a dollar amount. He had not saved her out of pity, but out of recognition, one survivor to another. "I'm sorry," she said. "About your mother." "I'm sorry about your brother, though I'm guessing the drinking is recent. 4 years since our parents died." Theresa found herself talking, the words spilling out like water from a cracked dam. She told him about Marcus before the alcohol, the good brother who had taught her to ride and helped her with arithmetic. She told him about the slow descent as the bottles took over, how he blamed her for everything, how she had tried to help until she realized he did not want help. She told him about the fear that had become her constant companion, the wondering when his anger would finally go too far. Colton listened without interrupting, his expression neutral but his attention complete. When she finally fell silent, he nodded slowly. "You cannot go back to him," he said. It was not a question. "No, even if he would take me, which he would not after this, I cannot. I see that now. I have been making excuses for him, telling myself he was still my brother underneath, that he would get better. But he sold me. Whatever love was between us is dead." "Then you need a plan." Colton stood and moved to the window, looking out at the street below. "I am heading north tomorrow to a ranch in Colorado Territory. A man I worked for last year is looking for hands, and he said I could bring good workers if I found any. The pay is fair, and his wife is always looking for help with the house and the garden. It is not easy work, but it is honest, and you would have a place to stay and food to eat." Theresa felt hope kindle in her chest, fragile as a candle flame. "You would take me with you?" "If you wanted to come, no obligations, no strings attached. You would work for your keep like anyone else, and what you earn is yours. And if you decide after a while that you want to move on, you would have saved enough to do it." It was more than Theresa had dared hope for. A job, a place to stay, a chance to build something for herself. But she had learned to be cautious. "What do you get out of this, Ihor?" she asked. Colton turned from the window, and for the first time she saw something that might have been a smile at the corner of his mouth. "The satisfaction of knowing I did the right thing, and maybe a traveling companion who can tell me if I'm about to do something stupid. The road to Colorado is long, and it gets boring talking to my horse." Despite everything, Theresa felt her own lips twitch in response. "Your horse does not appreciate your conversation?" "He is a good listener, but not much for debate." The moment of levity faded, but it left something behind, a tiny crack in the wall of fear and despair that had surrounded Theresa. She looked at the money on the bed, then at Colton. "I want to come with you," she said, "to Colorado, if the offer is real." "It is real. We leave tomorrow at dawn. That gives you today to rest and decide if there is anything you need from your brother's place, though I would recommend not going back there alone." "There's nothing I want from that cabin. Everything that mattered is already gone." Colton nodded. "Then get some sleep. I will be in the room next door if you need anything. And Theresa?" He paused at the door. "Lock this behind me. Trust is good, but caution is better." After he left, Theresa did as he suggested, sliding the bolt into place. Then she opened the package he had brought and found a simple but sturdy traveling dress, a shawl, undergarments, and a pair of boots that looked like they would actually fit. The care that had gone into choosing these items brought tears to her eyes. She could not remember the last time anyone had done something kind for her without expecting something in return. She changed into the new clothes, folding her old dress and setting it aside. Then she lay down on the bed, meaning to just rest for a moment, but exhaustion claimed her immediately. She slept deeply for the first time in months, without fear of waking to her brother's drunken rage. When dawn came, Theresa woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sounds of the town stirring to life below. For a moment she could not remember where she was. Then it all came back. Marcus, the saloon, Colton. She sat up, her heart pounding, half convinced it had all been a dream. But the new clothes were real. And when she opened the door, Colton was waiting in the hallway with his saddlebags and a canteen. "Ready?" he asked. "Yes." They went downstairs and out to the street, where Colton's chestnut horse waited alongside a smaller dappled mare. Theresa looked at him in surprise. "I figured you would need your own mount," Colton said, handing her the mare's reins. "Her name is Daisy, and she has a good temperament. The livery owner owed me a favor." Theresa ran her hand along Daisy's neck, feeling the warmth of the animal's coat. "Thank you. For everything. Thank me when we reach Colorado. It is a long road, and I might turn out to be terrible company." They mounted and rode out of Fort Stanton just as the sun cleared the eastern hills. Theresa did not look back at the town, or wonder if Marcus was watching from somewhere. That part of her life was over. Whatever came next, it had to be better. The first few days of travel were quiet. They rode north through high desert country, following trails that wound between mesas and across dry creek beds. Colton set a steady pace, not pushing too hard but covering good distance each day. At night he made camp with practiced efficiency, building small fires that would not attract attention and keeping watch while Theresa slept. She found herself studying him when she thought he was not looking. He moved with the quiet confidence of someone comfortable in the wilderness, and he seemed to know exactly where he was going without needing maps or signposts. When they passed other travelers, he was polite but cautious, and he always positioned himself between Theresa and any potential threat. On the fourth night, as they sat by the fire eating beans and hardtack, Theresa finally asked the question that had been building in her mind. "Why were you in Fort Stanton? You said something about a cattle drive?" Colton poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the darkness. "I have been working cattle drives for the past few years, ever since I left Missouri. It is hard work, but it pays, and I like being on the move. I was supposed to meet a trail boss in Fort Stanton about joining his crew for a drive to Kansas, but when I got there, I found out he had already left without me." "Is that why you are going to Colorado instead?" "Partly, also because I'm getting tired of the cattle drive life. You spend months eating dust, sleeping on the ground, and dealing with ornery steers, and at the end of it you get your pay and spend half of it on a hot bath and a real bed. I am ready for something more steady." "Do you have family? Besides your mother, I mean." Colton shook his head. "My father died when I was young, before we were sold. I had an older brother, but we got separated during the war. I tried to find him afterward, but—" He shrugged. "In Missouri, slave families were not kept together. People got sold wherever the money was. My brother could be anywhere, or he could be dead. I will probably never know." The pain in his voice was carefully controlled but unmistakable. Theresa thought about her own family, how Marcus had been her only remaining tie to her parents, to the life they had built before fever swept it all away. She had clung to that connection even as it poisoned her, unable to let go until it nearly destroyed her. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "It is not fair, how life tears people apart." "No, it is not, but we survive anyway. We find new reasons to keep going." He looked across the fire at her, his eyes reflecting the flames. "Like you are doing now." "I am not brave," Theresa said. "I just ran out of other options." Bravery is not about having no fear. It is about being terrified and moving forward anyway. You are braver than you think. The words settled into Theresa's heart, taking root in soil that had been barren for too long. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe she could be someone more than the frightened woman who had let her brother's fists shape her world. Maybe this journey was her chance to find out. As they traveled further north, the landscape began to change. The desert gave way to rolling grasslands, and the heat softened with the approach of September. They passed through small settlements and wide open spaces where antelope ran in the distance and eagles circled overhead. Theresa found herself relaxing in increments, her shoulders losing their perpetual hunch, her sleep becoming deeper and less troubled. Colton was easy to travel with. He did not press her with questions or demand conversation, but when they did talk, he listened with genuine interest. He taught her how to hobble the horses properly and how to read the land for signs of water. He showed her which plants were safe to eat and which would make you sick. And slowly, carefully, he taught her to trust again. One evening, about 2 weeks into their journey, they made camp beside a creek lined with cottonwood trees. The sound of running water was soothing after days of silence, and Theresa took the opportunity to wash some of their clothes while Colton tended to the horses. She was hanging a shirt to dry when she heard voices upstream. Colton heard them too and was instantly alert, his hand moving to his gun. 2 men emerged from the trees, leading horses and looking dusty from the trail. "Evening," one of them called out. He was middle-aged, with a thick beard and friendly eyes. "We are not looking for trouble, just passing through. Saw your fire and thought we would say hello." Colton relaxed slightly but kept himself positioned between the strangers and Theresa. "Evening? Where are you headed?" "Colorado territory, same as you if I had to guess from your direction. Name is Robert Miller, and this is my son James. We are taking supplies to my brother's ranch near Denver." They talked for a few minutes about trail conditions and weather, the kind of neutral conversation that established trust among travelers. Eventually, Colton invited them to share the fire, and the 4 of them sat down to coffee and conversation. James Miller was close to Theresa's age, with his father's friendly manner and an easy smile. He was clearly curious about her presence with Colton, but too polite to ask directly. Finally, his father did it for him. "You two married?" Robert asked bluntly. "No," Colton said calmly. "Just traveling together." Robert raised an eyebrow but did not comment. In this time and place, a man and woman traveling together without being married was unusual enough to raise questions. But frontier folk also understood that sometimes circumstances did not fit neatly into society's expectations. "How much further to the ranch you're heading to?" James asked, directing his question to Colton but glancing at Theresa. "Another week, maybe less if the weather holds." They talked until the fire burned low. Then the Millers moved off to set up their own camp a respectful distance away. After they left, Theresa helped Colton bank the fire for the night. "That James seemed interested in you," Colton observed, his tone neutral. Theresa shrugged. "He was nice enough, I suppose. If you wanted to travel with them instead, I would understand. A father and son would be more respectable companions than a single man." The offer surprised Theresa. She looked at Colton, trying to read his expression in the dying firelight. "Do you want me to go with them?" "I want you to do whatever makes you feel safest and gives you the best chance at a good life." "Then I am staying with you." The words came out more forcefully than Theresa intended, but she meant them. "You saved me, Colton. You gave me a chance when you did not have to. I am not going to abandon you for strangers just because they smile nicely." Something flickered in Colton's eyes, there and gone too quickly to name. "All right. I just wanted you to know you had the choice. I know. And I choose this." They settled into their bedrolls and Theresa lay awake for a while, listening to the creek and the night sounds of the wilderness. She thought about James Miller's friendly smile and how a few weeks ago she would have been terrified of any man's attention. But now, knowing Colton was nearby, she felt secure. Not because he was protecting her exactly, but because he had proven he saw her as a person worth protecting, worth listening to, worth giving choices to. It was a strange feeling, this growing sense of safety. Even stranger was the realization that she was starting to look forward to the mornings when she would wake to find Colton already up, making coffee and saddling the horses. She liked the way he moved, economical and purposeful. She liked his rare smiles and the sound of his voice when he told stories about his cattle driving days. She liked the way he never made her feel weak or foolish, even when she made mistakes. It was not love, Theresa told herself firmly. It was gratitude and relief, and the natural attachment that came from depending on someone in difficult circumstances. Love was something else entirely, something she had no room for in her life right now. She needed to focus on surviving, on building a future, not on romantic feelings for the man who had rescued her. But as the days passed and they drew closer to Colorado, Theresa found it harder to deny what was growing between them. It was there in the way Colton had started seeking out her opinion on which route to take, trusting her judgment. It was there in the way she found herself watching him when he was not looking, memorizing the line of his jaw and the way his hair curled slightly at his neck. It was there in the comfortable silences and the moments when their eyes met across the campfire and held for just a breath too long. Neither of them spoke of it. The unspoken thing floated between them like morning mist, acknowledged but not named. They crossed into Colorado territory in mid-September, following the mountain ranges that rose like walls against the western sky. The air was thinner here, crisper, and the aspens were starting to turn gold. Colton's mood seemed to lighten as they traveled, and he pointed out landmarks, telling Theresa about the ranch where they were headed. The owner is a man named Thomas Brennan. Irish immigrant, came over during the potato famine and worked his way west. He started the ranch about 10 years ago with his wife, Catherine. They run cattle and horses, and they treat their workers fairly. I spent a season there 2 years ago, and it was the best job I've had since leaving Missouri. Why did you leave? Wanderlust, mostly. I was not ready to settle down yet, but I think I might be now. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Theresa wanted to ask what he meant, whether settling down included her, but she was afraid of the answer either way. The Brennan Ranch appeared on a clear afternoon, sprawling across a valley with the mountains rising behind it. The main house was built of logs and stone, solid and welcoming, and there were several outbuildings, including a barn, a bunkhouse, and a stable. Cattle grazed in fenced pastures, and horses ran in a corral, tossing their heads and whinnying at the newcomers. A man emerged from the barn as they rode up, shading his eyes against the sun. When he recognized Colton, his weathered face split into a grin. "Colton Vaughn, as I live and breathe, I was starting to think you would not show up." Colton dismounted and shook hands with Thomas Brennan, who was shorter than Colton but built like a bull, all muscle and strength. "I got delayed in New Mexico but made good time coming north. Thomas, this is Theresa Vaughn. Theresa, Thomas Brennan." Thomas's eyes were sharp as he looked at Theresa, taking in her worn appearance and the fading bruise on her face. But his voice was kind when he spoke. "Welcome to the Brennan Ranch, Miss Vaughn. Any friend of Colton's is welcome here. Come on up to the house, and we will get you both settled." Catherine Brennan was a plump, energetic woman with graying red hair and a smile that could warm a room. She took one look at Theresa and immediately swept her into the kitchen, clucking over her thinness and insisting she sit down for a proper meal. "Colton mentioned in his telegram he might be bringing someone," Catherine said, setting a plate of roast chicken and potatoes in front of Theresa, though he did not give many details. "Are you two married?" "No, madam," Theresa said. "Colton helped me out of a difficult situation, and he offered me work here if you have a place for me." Catherine's expression softened with understanding. "We always have room for good workers, and Lord knows I could use help around the house. The ranch hands are wonderful boys, but they track mud everywhere and think clean socks appear by magic. If you are willing to help with cooking, cleaning, and mending, you will earn your keep, and then some." Relief flooded through Theresa. "I would be grateful for the work." "Then it is settled. You can have the room off the kitchen. It is small but private, and it has a good stove to keep you warm when winter comes. Now eat up before that food gets cold. You look like you have missed more meals than you have eaten." Over the next few weeks, Theresa settled into ranch life. She rose early to help Catherine prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, spent the day cleaning, mending clothes, and helping with the endless tasks that kept a ranch running. The work was hard but satisfying, and for the first time in years, Theresa went to bed tired from honest labor rather than from fear and stress. Colton worked with the other ranch hands, tending cattle, mending fences, and breaking horses. Theresa saw him at meals and sometimes in the evenings when everyone gathered in the main room to talk or play cards. He fit into the ranch easily, respected by the other men for his skill and his quiet competence. But something had changed between them since they arrived at the ranch. The easy intimacy of the trail had been replaced by a careful politeness, as if both of them were trying to establish boundaries now that they were no longer traveling alone. Theresa told herself this was good, proper even. They could not continue the way they had been on the road, just the two of them against the world. Now they had to be realistic about their situations and their futures. Still, she found herself watching for him, her heart lifting when he came into the kitchen for coffee or when their eyes met across the dinner table. And sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch in her throat. October arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of winter in the air. The ranch prepared for the coming cold, stocking supplies and bringing the cattle down from the high pastures. Everyone worked long hours and exhaustion was the common currency. One evening, Theresa was alone in the kitchen finishing the dinner cleanup when Colton came in through the back door. He looked tired, his clothes dusty from a day of hard riding. "There is stew left if you are hungry," Theresa said, wiping her hands on her apron. "And fresh bread." "Thank you." He served himself and sat at the big kitchen table. For a few minutes, the only sound was the clink of his spoon against the bowl. Theresa continued putting away the clean dishes, aware of his presence in a way that made her skin prickle with nervous energy. Finally, she could not stand the silence anymore. "You have been avoiding me," she said, not turning around. There was a pause. "No, I have been working." "It is more than that. Ever since we got here, you have been different, distant." She heard him set down his spoon. "Theresa, look at me." She turned, finding him standing now, his expression serious. "I have been trying to give you space," Colton said. "On the trail, it was just the two of us and there was a certain closeness that developed. But here, with other people around, I thought you might want the chance to make your own life without me hovering around. You have been through enough without having to deal with some cowboy's feelings getting in the way." Theresa's heart began to pound. "What feelings?" Colton ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had come to recognize. "I am not good at talking about this kind of thing, but I would be lying if I said I did not care about you as more than just someone I helped out. These past weeks traveling together, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your courage. Theresa, I've spent years telling myself I did not need anyone, that it was easier to be alone, but then you came along and turned everything upside down." The words hung in the air between them, and Theresa felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, terrified and exhilarated at the same time. She had been so focused on surviving, on putting one foot in front of the other, that she had not let herself think about what she truly wanted. But she knew now. She knew with a certainty that burned away all her doubts. "I care about you too," she said softly. "I have been trying not to, telling myself it was just gratitude or circumstance, but it is more than that. You make me feel safe, Colton. Not just physically safe, but safe to be myself, to have opinions and make mistakes and learn. You see me as a whole person, not just a problem to be solved or a burden to be endured." Colton crossed the kitchen in 2 strides, stopping just in front of her. He was close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "I do see you," he said quietly. "I see a woman who survived things that would have broken most people. I see someone kind and smart and braver than she believes, and I see someone I want to know better, if she will let me." "Yes," Theresa whispered. "Yes, I want that too." Colton reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and cupped her face in his calloused hand. His touch was gentle, reverent, nothing like the violence she had known from her brother. When he leaned down to kiss her, Theresa rose on her toes to meet him, her hands clutching the front of his shirt. The kiss was soft and tentative at first, a question being asked and answered. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more real. Theresa felt years of loneliness and fear melting away, replaced by warmth and connection and the overwhelming rightness of being held by someone who truly cared for her. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. Colton rested his forehead against hers, his hands still framing her face. I have wanted to do that since the day we left Fort Stanton, he admitted. Theresa laughed, a sound of pure joy that surprised her. I have wanted you to do it since about the second day on the trail. We are both fools then, wasting all that time? Maybe, or maybe we needed the time to be sure. Colton kissed her again, softer this time, and Theresa let herself sink into it, memorizing the feel of his lips, the way his hands trembled slightly as they held her. This was what love was supposed to be, she realized. Not the desperate clinging she had felt with Marcus, trying to hold onto the ghost of her family. This was a choice made freely. Two people finding each other and deciding they wanted to build something together. They heard footsteps on the porch, and they pulled apart quickly, both of them flushed and grinning like children caught stealing cookies. Thomas Brennan came in through the back door, took one look at them, and started laughing. "About time," he said, heading for the coffee pot. "Catherine owes me $5. She bet it would take until November before you two figured things out." Colton and Theresa looked at each other and burst out laughing. The tension that had hung between them for weeks evaporated, replaced by an easiness that felt like coming home. Over the following weeks, their relationship deepened naturally. They were still circumspect around others, aware of the need to maintain propriety, but everyone on the ranch could see the change in them. Colton smiled more, and Theresa bloomed like a flower finally getting enough sun and water. They took walks together in the evenings when the work was done, talking about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Colton told her more about his time during the war, the horrors he had seen, and the friends he had lost. Theresa told him about her parents, keeping their memory alive by sharing stories of her father's terrible jokes and her mother's beautiful singing voice. "Do you ever think about going back to Missouri?" Theresa asked one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. "To look for your brother again?" Colton was quiet for a long moment. "I used to think about it all the time, but the longer I am out here, the more I realize that the past is past. If my brother is alive and wants to find me, there are ways. The Freedmen's Bureau keeps records, tries to reunite families. I left my information with them years ago. If he has not found me by now, it is because he cannot or because he has moved on with his life. Either way, I need to do the same." "Does that make you sad?" "Sometimes. But I am also learning that family is not always about blood. It is about the people who choose to stand by you. Like Thomas and Catherine, who took me in and treated me fairly when a lot of ranchers would not hire a black cowboy. Like you, who trusted me when you had every reason not to trust anyone." Theresa took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I am glad I trusted you. You saved my life, Colton." "We saved each other," he corrected gently. "You gave me a reason to stop wandering and start building something real." As winter approached, the question of the future became more pressing. Colton and Theresa had fallen into an easy rhythm on the ranch, but everyone knew this limbo could not last forever. They cared for each other deeply, but what did that mean in practical terms? The answer came one snowy December evening. The first real storm of winter had blown in, covering the ranch in a thick blanket of white. Everyone was gathered in the main house, enjoying Catherine's hot cider and the warmth of the fireplace. Thomas was telling a story about the early days of the ranch when Catherine interrupted him. "Before my husband bores you all to death with tales you have heard a dozen times, I have something to say." She looked at Colton and Theresa with twinkling eyes. "Thomas and I have been talking, and we have a proposal for you two." Colton and Theresa exchanged glances, curious and slightly nervous. Thomas took over. "We are not getting any younger, and this ranch is more than the two of us can handle. We have been thinking about taking on a partner, someone who could help run things and eventually take over when we are too old and feeble to do it ourselves. Colton, you have proven yourself to be a skilled rancher and a good man. We would like to offer you a partnership in this place." Colton looked stunned. "Thomas, I do not have money for a stake in the ranch." "You have something better: skill, dedication, and intelligence. You would work for a smaller wage for the first year while you build up equity, and then we would make it official with paperwork and everything. This would be your ranch, your legacy." And Theresa, Catherine added, you have become like a daughter to us. Whether you and Colton are just friends or something more, you will always have a home here. But I would be lying if I said I had not noticed the way you two look at each other. The other ranch hands were grinning now, clearly in on the secret. Theresa felt her face burning, but she could not help smiling too. Colton stood up, his expression serious. Thomas, Catherine, I do not know what to say. This is more than generous. It is everything I have been working toward without knowing what I was working for. Then say yes, Thomas said with a grin, unless you're fool enough to turn down the best opportunity you will ever get. I'm not that much of a fool. Colton turned to Theresa, but there is something I need to do first. He took her hand and pulled her to her feet. In front of everyone in the room, he dropped to one knee. Theresa's heart stopped. Theresa Vaughn, I know we have not known each other long. I know your life has been turned upside down, and you are still finding your footing. But I also know that I love you. I love your strength, your kindness, your determination to keep going, even when everything seems impossible. I love the way you hum while you work and the way you laugh at my terrible jokes. I love how you have made this ranch feel like home. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I want to build a life with you, not because you need rescuing, but because I cannot imagine my future without you in it. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down Theresa's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. Yes, yes, Colton, I will marry you. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Colton stood and pulled Theresa into his arms, kissing her soundly while everyone whistled and laughed. When they finally came up for air, Catherine was crying happy tears and already planning the wedding. We will do it right here at the ranch, she declared. In the spring when the wildflowers bloom, oh, it will be beautiful. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of congratulations and celebration. When things finally quieted down and people drifted off to bed, Theresa and Colton found themselves alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket against the cold. Are you sure about this? Theresa asked quietly. About me? About the ranch? All of it? Colton tightened his arm around her. I have never been more sure of anything in my life. I spent years drifting, looking for something without knowing what it was. Turns out I was looking for you. I was not looking for anything, Theresa admitted. I was just trying to survive. But then you came along and gave me something to live for instead of just something to endure. You gave me hope, Colton. You gave me a future. We gave each other those things, Inari, he said, echoing his earlier words. And we are going to build something amazing together. This ranch, our life, our family, everything. Family, Theresa repeated softly, tasting the word. For so long, family had meant pain and disappointment. But now it was taking on a new meaning, one filled with possibility and love. They sat together in the quiet darkness, watching snow fall and dreaming of the future they would build. Winter on the ranch was beautiful and harsh in equal measure. Snow piled high, and the work became a constant battle against the cold. But inside, the house was warm with more than just fire. Theresa and Colton spent the long evenings planning their wedding and their future. They talked about the improvements they wanted to make to the ranch, the horses they would raise, the life they would create. Theresa also began teaching herself to read better. She had basic reading skills from childhood, but Catherine had an extensive library and Theresa devoured books on ranching, animal husbandry, and business. She was determined to be more than just Colton's wife. She wanted to be his true partner in every sense of the word. You are going to know more about running this place than I do, Colton teased one evening, finding her poring over a book about breeding cattle. That would not be difficult, Theresa shot back with a grin. You thought heifers and calves were the same thing when we first met. I did not. I was just testing to see if you were paying attention. Sure you were. She set aside the book and moved to sit beside him on the small sofa in the kitchen. I want to be useful, Colton. I want to contribute more than just cooking and cleaning. You already contribute more than that. You have good instincts about people and situations. Thomas said you caught that rot in the grain before it could spread last month, saving us a fortune. And the way you handled that dispute between two of the ranch hands was masterful. You have the makings of a fine ranch owner. Pride warmed Theresa from the inside out. She had never imagined herself as someone capable of leadership or business. But here, with Colton and the Brennans believing in her, she was discovering strengths she never knew she had. "What about children?" she asked suddenly. "Do you want them?" Colton was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I never let myself think about it much. During the war and after, survival was all that mattered. Then I was on the move so much that settling down seemed impossible. But now with you, with this ranch? Yes, I would like children. A family of our own. What about you?" Theresa had to think about it honestly. Children had always been a vague someday thought, especially during the years with Marcus when just surviving took all her energy. But now? "Yes," she said slowly. "I think I would like that. Not right away, maybe. I want time to learn the ranch, to feel secure in our life together. But someday, yes. Someday sounds perfect." Colton pulled her close, and they sat together in comfortable silence, imagining the children who might someday run through these rooms. As the months passed, Theresa found herself thinking less and less about her old life. She never heard from Marcus and did not seek news of him. As far as she was concerned, her brother had died the day he sold her. Whatever happened to him now was not her concern. The one shadow on her happiness was the fear that Marcus might someday show up, drunk and belligerent, demanding money or trying to take her back. She mentioned this fear to Colton one night, and he listened seriously. "If he comes here, he will be trespassing on private property, and we have every right to refuse him entry, and if he tries to force the issue..." Colton's jaw tightened. "I will do whatever is necessary to protect you. You are not his property, and you never were. He has no claim on you. But legally, is he not still my guardian? I am unmarried and..." "You are 20 years old enough to make your own decisions, and once we are married, any legal claim he might have had is dissolved anyway. You will be my wife, under my protection in the eyes of the law." He saw her expression and added quickly, "Not that I think of you as property either. But the law does, and in this case that works in our favor." Theresa nodded, comforted by his certainty. She knew that frontier justice was often more about strength and determination than legal niceties, and Colton had both. Spring arrived slowly, teasing them with warm days followed by late snowstorms. But eventually the weather settled, and the wildflowers began to bloom just as Catherine had predicted. Purple lupine and red Indian paintbrush carpeted the meadows, and the aspen leaves trembled green and new in the breeze. The wedding was set for the first Saturday in May. Catherine had recruited every woman within riding distance to help with preparations, and the ranch buzzed with activity. A minister came from the nearest town, and Thomas slaughtered a steer for the feast. The ranch hands cleaned the barn and decorated it with wildflowers and ribbons. The night before the wedding, Theresa lay awake in her small room off the kitchen, too excited and nervous to sleep. Tomorrow she would marry Colton Vaughn, the man who had saved her and then loved her. Tomorrow she would become part of something bigger than herself, a family built on choice rather than blood. She thought about where she had been just 9 months ago, standing in that saloon in Fort Stanton, certain her life was over. She thought about the terrified woman who had climbed onto a horse, not knowing if she was riding toward salvation or another nightmare. That woman felt like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Theresa, are you awake?" Catherine's voice. "Yes, come in." Catherine entered carrying a package wrapped in tissue paper. She sat on the edge of Theresa's bed, her expression tender. "I wanted to give you this before tomorrow, when everything will be chaos." She handed Theresa the package. "Open it." Theresa carefully unwrapped the tissue to reveal a beautiful white dress, simple but elegant, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She gasped. "Catherine, this is too much." "Nonsense. Every bride deserves a proper wedding dress. I made it myself using measurements from your work dresses. I hope it fits." Theresa felt tears pricking her eyes. "It is beautiful. Thank you for everything. You and Thomas have been so kind to me, treating me like family when you had no obligation to do so." Catherine reached out and squeezed Theresa's hand. "You are family, dear girl. The moment you walked onto this ranch, you became one of us. And tomorrow it will be official." She paused, her expression becoming more serious. "I know your own mother is not here to give you advice about marriage. Would you like some from an old woman who has been wed for 30 years? "Yes, please." "Marriage is work, Theresa. Good work, satisfying work, but work nonetheless. There will be days when you're so angry with Colton you want to throttle him. There will be times when he says or does something idiotic, and you will wonder what you saw in him. But here's the secret: you choose each other every single day, not just on the happy days, but on the hard days too. You wake up and decide that this person, this flawed, frustrating, wonderful person, is who you want to go through life with. And if you both keep making that choice, you will build something that lasts." Theresa nodded, taking the words to heart. "Thank you, Catherine. I will remember that." The older woman kissed her forehead. "Now get some sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a very long, very wonderful day." The wedding dawned clear and warm, with a sky so blue it almost hurt to look at. Theresa woke early, her stomach fluttering with nervous excitement. Catherine helped her into the white dress, which fit perfectly, and braided wildflowers into her hair. When Theresa looked at herself in the small mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. This was not the frightened, broken creature who had arrived at the ranch. This was someone strong, someone hopeful, someone loved. The ceremony was held in the meadow near the ranch house, with the mountains providing a stunning backdrop. Rows of chairs had been set up, and it seemed like half of Colorado territory had shown up to witness the wedding. Ranch hands, neighboring ranchers, townspeople from the nearest settlement all gathered to celebrate. Colton stood at the makeshift altar, looking impossibly handsome in a new suit. When he saw Theresa walking toward him, his eyes lit up with such pure love and joy that she felt tears streaming down her face. Thomas walked her down the aisle, having volunteered to stand in for her father. When they reached Colton, Thomas placed Theresa's hand in his with a firm nod of approval. The minister led them through the traditional vows, his voice carrying across the meadow. When it came time for Colton to speak, he turned to face Theresa fully, taking both her hands in his. "Theresa, I vow to love you for all my days, to be your partner, your friend, your home. I vow to listen when you speak, to support your dreams, and to stand by your side through whatever comes. I vow to see you, truly see you for who you are and who you will become. I vow to build a life with you that honors us both. This I swear before God and these witnesses." Theresa's voice shook as she gave her own vows. "Colton, I vow to love you with all my heart, to be honest, loyal, and true. I vow to work beside you, to dream with you, and to face all challenges together. I vow to never forget that you gave me freedom when I had none, and to spend my life showing you that your faith in me was not misplaced. I vow to build a family with you, to make this ranch a home, and to choose you every single day. This I swear before God and these witnesses." When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Colton kissed Theresa with such tenderness that several people in the audience openly wept. Then he swept her up in his arms, spinning her around while everyone cheered. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food, music, and dancing under the stars. Theresa danced with Colton, with Thomas, with ranch hands and neighbors, and even the minister. She felt lighter than air, as if she might float away on pure happiness. Late in the evening, she and Colton slipped away from the party, walking hand in hand toward the small cabin that Thomas had helped them build over the winter. It was their home now, separate from the main house, but close enough to remain part of the ranch community. Inside, Colton lit a lamp, and warm light filled the single room. It was simply furnished but cozy, with a bed, a table, chairs, and a small stove. Theresa looked around, seeing not what was there but what would be. Years of shared meals, quiet evenings, children playing on the floor, a lifetime of memories waiting to be made. Colton came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Happy, Mrs. Vaughn?" "Happier than I ever thought possible," she admitted, leaning back against him. "Is this real? Sometimes I'm afraid I will wake up and find it was all a dream." "It is real. I am real, you are real, and our life together is real." He turned her to face him, his expression serious. "Theresa, I need you to know something. I did not marry you out of obligation or pity. I married you because I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person. You are not a project or a responsibility. You are my partner, my equal, my choice." "I know that," Theresa said softly, "and I love you the same way, not because you saved me, but because of who you are. You are kind and strong and honest. You see the best in people, including me. You make me want to be brave, to grow, to become more than I ever thought I could be." They kissed, and this time there was no need to hold back or be circumspect. This was their wedding night, the beginning of their life as husband and wife. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The first year of marriage was an adjustment, as Catherine had warned. Theresa and Colton learned each other's rhythms, their habits, their quirks. They had their first fight about 3 months in, a ridiculous argument about the best way to organize the barn that escalated into both of them saying things they did not mean. They spent a miserable day avoiding each other before Colton finally came to find Theresa in the vegetable garden. "I am sorry, Moise," he said simply. "I was wrong about the barn, but more importantly, I was dismissive of your ideas. You had good reasons for your suggestions, and I should have listened instead of just assuming my way was better." Theresa set down her trowel and stood up. "I am sorry, too. I got defensive when I should have explained my thinking better, and I said some cruel things that were not fair." They reconciled, learning an important lesson about communication and respect. As Catherine had said, they chose each other, even when it was hard. They also learned the joy of partnership. When spring came again, Theresa worked alongside Colton during calving season, staying up all night to help a struggling cow deliver twins. When summer brought drought, she was the one who suggested digging a new well, her reading having taught her about water tables and aquifers. Her instincts proved correct, and the well became a vital resource for the ranch. Thomas and Catherine formally signed over a partnership stake in the ranch that fall, making Colton and Theresa part owners. They celebrated with a quiet dinner, the four of them toasting to the future of the Brennan Ranch. 2 years after their wedding, Theresa realized she was pregnant. She told Colton on a crisp October evening as they sat on the porch of their cabin watching the sunset. "I went to see the doctor in town yesterday," she said, trying to keep her voice casual. "He confirmed what I suspected. We are going to have a baby." Colton froze, his coffee cup halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down carefully and turned to her, his eyes wide. "A baby? You are sure?" "The doctor is sure. He says I'm about 3 months along. The baby should come in April." Colton let out a whoop of joy that probably carried all the way to the main house. He pulled Theresa into his arms, careful not to squeeze too hard, and buried his face in her hair. "We're going to have a baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. "A child. Our child." Theresa felt tears of happiness streaming down her face. "Are you happy?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once." He pulled back to look at her. "How are you feeling? Are you sick? Do you need to rest more? Should you stop working so hard?" She laughed at his concern. "I am fine, Colton. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "I can still work. I will just be more careful about lifting heavy things. The doctor said everything looks good." Over the following months, they prepared for the baby's arrival. Colton built a cradle from wood he had been seasoning for a year, carving delicate patterns into the headboard. Catherine and the neighbor women sewed tiny clothes and blankets. Thomas cleared out a storage room in the main house for all the baby supplies, joking that one grandchild was going to require more space than all their ranch equipment combined. Winter passed slowly. each day bringing them closer to the moment when their family would expand. Theresa found herself thinking often about her own mother, wishing she could be there to meet her grandchild. But she also felt her mother's presence in the way Catherine fussed over her, in the way the ranch community rallied around them, in the legacy of love her parents had given her even if they had been taken too soon. She never thought about Marcus. He was a ghost from another life, and she had no room in her heart for ghosts. The baby came on a warm April morning, arriving faster than anyone expected. Theresa's labor began at dawn, and by noon, she held a squalling, perfect baby boy in her arms. Colton was there through it all, holding her hand, wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement and love. "He is perfect," Colton whispered, carefully touching the baby's tiny hand. "Look at him, Theresa. We made a person." "We did." Theresa felt exhausted and exhilarated and more in love than she had ever been. What should we name him? They had discussed names for months without settling on anything, but now, looking at their son's face, Theresa knew. "What about James, after your father?" Colton had told her his father's name during one of their long conversations. Colton's eyes filled with tears. "You want to name him after my father?" "He should know where he comes from. Both sides of his family, the good and the bad. Your father was a good man from what you have told me. Our son should carry his name." "James Vaughn," Colton said softly, testing the sound. "I love it, thank you." James Vaughn was a healthy, happy baby who quickly became the center of the ranch's universe. The ranch hands competed for the honor of holding him, and Thomas and Catherine were shameless in their grandparental devotion. Theresa and Colton settled into the exhausting, wonderful chaos of new parenthood, taking turns walking the floor at night and marveling at every milestone. 2 years later, a second son arrived, Matthew, named for Theresa's father. Then 3 years after that, a daughter they named Catherine Rose, after the woman who had become like a mother to Theresa. The years flowed by, each one bringing new challenges and new joys. The ranch prospered under the partnership of Thomas, Catherine, Colton, and Theresa. They expanded the herds, built new outbuildings, and became known throughout the territory for their quality horses and fair business practices. When James was 10 years old, Thomas and Catherine decided to fully retire, signing the ranch over to Colton and Theresa. It was an emotional day, marking the end of one era and the beginning of another. "We built something good here," Thomas said that evening at dinner, surrounded by the extended family they had created. "But you two have made it something great. This ranch will thrive under your leadership." "We could not have done it without you," Colton replied. "You took a chance on a drifter cowboy and a lost woman, and you gave us the opportunity to build a life. We will never forget that." The Vaughn Ranch, as it was now called, continued to grow. James showed a natural talent for working with horses, while Matthew was fascinated by the business side of ranching, always asking questions about ledgers and contracts. Little Catherine, at 5 years old, was fearless and determined, insisting she could do anything her brothers could do. One summer evening, when Theresa was 35 and Colton was 40, they sat on the porch of their cabin watching their children play in the yard. The cabin had been expanded over the years, growing into a proper house with multiple bedrooms and a large kitchen, but they still called it the cabin out of habit. "Do you ever think about that day in Fort Stanton?" Colton asked suddenly. Theresa knew exactly which day he meant. "Sometimes. It feels like another lifetime, like it happened to someone else." "In a way, it did. We are not the same people we were then." "No, we are not. We have grown, changed, built something beautiful together." She reached over and took his hand, their fingers lacing together as naturally as breathing. "I used to think my life ended that day, but it was really just the beginning." "The beginning of our story," Colton agreed. "Thank you," Theresa said softly, "for seeing me when I felt invisible, for giving me freedom when you could have taken advantage, for loving me when I did not think I deserved to be loved. You gave me everything." We gave each other everything, Colton corrected, as he always did. I was lost before you, Theresa, drifting without purpose or direction. You gave me a reason to put down roots, to build instead of wander. You gave me a family, a home, a future. Everything I am, everything we have built, is because we found each other. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Their children's laughter carried on the evening breeze, a sound that never failed to fill Theresa's heart with joy. The following winter brought tragedy when Thomas passed away peacefully in his sleep. The entire community mourned the loss of a good man, and Theresa and Colton supported Catherine through her grief. She moved in with them permanently, finding comfort in being surrounded by family. He had a good life, Catherine said one evening, sitting by the fire with a cup of tea. And he got to see this ranch become everything he dreamed it would be. That is more than most people get. More years passed. James grew into a skilled horseman and married the daughter of a neighboring rancher, bringing her to live at the Vaughn Ranch. Matthew went to Denver to study business and law, planning to return and help manage the ranch's expanding operations. Catherine, true to her fearless nature, announced at 15 that she wanted to be a veterinarian, shocking everyone but surprising no one. Theresa and Colton aged gracefully into their roles as ranch owners, parents, and eventually grandparents. On their 25th wedding anniversary, they took a rare trip away from the ranch, riding back to the spot where Colton had first proposed partnership to Theresa on the trail from New Mexico. The landscape was unchanged, eternal in its harsh beauty. They made camp just as they had all those years ago, though now they had better equipment and fuller saddlebags. "Do you have any regrets?" Theresa asked as they sat by the fire under a canopy of stars. Colton thought for a moment. "I regret that I never found my mother or my brother. I regret that your parents and Marcus could not be saved from their fates. But about us, about the life we have built, no regrets at all. Every choice led me to you, and that makes them all worthwhile." "I have one regret," Theresa admitted. Colton looked at her in surprise. "I regret that I did not kiss you sooner on the trail. We wasted so much time being cautious." Colton laughed, the sound echoing across the quiet landscape. "Then let us make up for lost time." He pulled her close and kissed her with all the passion and tenderness of their 25 years together. Theresa kissed him back, grateful beyond words for the twist of fate that had brought this man into her life. They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready for whatever the next phase of their lives would bring. And there was plenty to keep them busy. The ranch to run, children and grandchildren to love, a community to serve. Catherine Brennan passed away 5 years after Thomas, dying peacefully surrounded by the family she had helped build. At her funeral, Theresa spoke about the woman who had taken in a broken stranger and loved her back to wholeness. "She taught me that family is not just about blood," Theresa said, her voice carrying across the crowded church. "It is about choosing to show up for each other day after day, year after year. She chose me, and in doing so, she changed the entire trajectory of my life. I will love her and honor her memory until my last breath." As the years turned into decades, the Vaughn Ranch became a fixture in Colorado, known for its quality livestock, fair dealing, and the strong family at its heart. Theresa and Colton watched their children grow into capable adults, watched their grandchildren take their first steps and speak their first words, watched the ranch evolve with the changing times. On Theresa's 60th birthday, the whole family gathered for a celebration. The house was full of noise and laughter, 3 generations of Vaughns sharing stories and making memories. Colton, now 65 with silver in his hair, but still strong and vital, stood up to make a toast. 40 years ago, I walked into a saloon in Fort Stanton looking for work. Instead, I found something much more valuable. I found my purpose, my partner, my love. Theresa, you have been my North Star, guiding me through every storm and celebrating with me in every victory. You have given me children, grandchildren, and a life beyond my wildest dreams. I love you more today than I did on our wedding day, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today. Here is to you, to us, and to the family we have built together." Everyone raised their glasses, and Theresa felt tears streaming down her face. She looked around the room at all the faces gathered there, this family born from tragedy and transformed by love. She thought about the frightened girl who had stood in that saloon believing her life was over, and she marveled at the distance she had traveled. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "all of you for being part of this beautiful, chaotic, wonderful life. I love you all so very much." The party continued late into the night, but eventually people drifted off to bed or headed home. Theresa and Colton found themselves alone on the porch of their house, wrapped in blankets against the cool mountain air. "We did well, did we not?" Colton asked softly. "We did better than well. We built something that will last long after we are gone. Our children understand the value of hard work, honesty, and treating people fairly. Our grandchildren are growing up with love and security. The ranch is thriving. We have friends, respect, a legacy. What more could anyone want?" "Nothing," Colton agreed. "Absolutely nothing." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had been through fire and come out refined, stronger, better. Their love had not been easy or simple, but it had been real, tested, and proven over 4 decades of shared life. As the years continued to pass, Theresa and Colton gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch, trusting James and Matthew to take over. They spent their time with grandchildren, took long rides together through the mountains they loved, and simply enjoyed the peace that comes from a life well lived. Theresa never forgot where she came from or what she had survived. The scar on her lip from Marcus's final blow faded, but never completely disappeared. Sometimes she would catch sight of it in the mirror and remember that day in the saloon, the terror and desperation that had consumed her. But mostly she remembered what came after: freedom, love, family, purpose. She remembered Colton's hand extended in that saloon, offering not ownership but liberation. She remembered the long trail to Colorado and the gradual healing of her wounded heart. She remembered building a life brick by brick, choice by choice, day by day. On their 50th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered again for a massive celebration. Theresa was 70 now, Colton 75, both of them showing their age but still sharp and engaged with the world. Their children and grandchildren had prepared speeches, and there was not a dry eye in the house as each person spoke about what Theresa and Colton meant to them. James talked about learning integrity from watching his father treat everyone with respect, regardless of their background or position. Matthew spoke about his mother's fierce intelligence and how she had shown him that true strength comes from kindness. Catherine, now a successful veterinarian with a family of her own, talked about being named after 2 strong women and trying to live up to their example every day. When it was Theresa's turn to speak, she stood slowly, leaning slightly on Colton's arm. She looked around at all the faces gathered there. This family that had grown from 2 broken people finding each other in a harsh land. 50 years ago, I married my best friend," she began. "I married a man who saw me not as damaged goods or a project to fix, but as a whole person worthy of love and respect. He gave me freedom when he could have demanded obedience. He gave me partnership when he could have insisted on authority. He gave me love when I thought I would never trust anyone again. Colton, you saved my life, and then you gave me a reason to live it fully. Everything I am, everything we have built, starts with you." She turned to their children and grandchildren. "And all of you are the proof that love can overcome anything. Your grandfather and I came from pain and loss, but we chose to build something beautiful instead of passing on our hurt. We chose forgiveness over bitterness, hope over despair, love over fear. I hope that is the legacy you carry forward, the knowledge that no matter where you start, you can create something meaningful if you are willing to work for it and to open your heart. The celebration lasted well into the night, but eventually Theresa and Colton found themselves alone again, sitting on the porch that had been their favorite spot for 5 decades. "Tired?" Colton asked, taking her hand. "A little. Happy, though. So very happy." "Me too." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who did not have much to offer except his word and his heart." "You had everything I needed," Theresa said. "You gave me my life back, Colton. And then you filled it with so much love and joy that I sometimes cannot believe it is real." "It is real. We are real. And we are going to keep being real for as long as we have left." They did just that. Colton lived to be 82, still riding and working on the ranch until a few months before the end, when he passed peacefully in his sleep. Theresa held his hand and whispered all the things she had told him 1,000 times but wanted to say once more. "I love you. Thank you. You gave me everything." She mourned him deeply, but not destructively. Colton had given her too much joy to let his death define her. Instead, she focused on honoring his memory by continuing the work they had started together. She spent time with her children and grandchildren, sharing stories about their grandfather and the values he embodied. She continued to be involved in the ranch, offering advice and wisdom earned through decades of experience. Theresa Vaughn lived to be 85, surrounded by family and loved until her last breath. In her final days, she often spoke about Colton, seeing him sometimes in the room with her, smiling and waiting. Her children and grandchildren gathered around, holding her hands and telling her it was okay to go, that they would carry on the legacy she and Colton had built. "I am not afraid," she whispered near the end. "I am going home." And when she closed her eyes for the last time, those who were there swore she was smiling, as if she could already see the man who had been waiting for her all this time. The Vaughn Ranch continued for generations, a testament to what two people could build when they chose love over fear, partnership over dominance, hope over despair. And somewhere in the foundation of that legacy, in every board and beam and fence post, lived the story of a cowboy who bought a woman's freedom and a woman who gave him a reason to finally come home. Their story became part of the ranch's mythology, told to children and grandchildren as an example of what true love looked like. Not a fairy tale where a prince saved a princess, but a real story where two broken people saved each other and built something that would outlast them both. Years turned to decades, decades to a century, and still the Vaughn Ranch stood. The original cabin where Theresa and Colton had lived was preserved as a historical landmark, filled with their belongings and photographs that told the story of their life together. Tourists would sometimes visit, drawn by the romantic tale of the cowboy and the woman he freed. But for the Vaughn descendants, it was more than just a story. It was the foundation of everything they were, a reminder that family is built through choice and love, that redemption is possible, that one act of courage can change the trajectory of generations. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blows down from the mountains and the sun sets over the Colorado landscape, some say you can still see two figures sitting on the porch of that old cabin, holding hands and watching over the ranch they built together. A cowboy and his wife, still choosing each other, still building there forever, still proving that the greatest adventure is the one you share with the person you love. Their story ended not with a grand gesture or dramatic finale, but with the quiet satisfaction of a life fully lived and a love that transcended everything that tried to break it. In the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything.